Hi everyone, my name is Alicia Cheah. I'm Director, Community Content at A Cloud Guru. Thanks so much for tuning into my session, What's the Worst That Cloud Happened? A License to Upskill. I'm here to share with you today my experience of upskilling for and through AWS certifications and why I think it's such a worthwhile thing to do. In this session, I'll be sharing some practical tips and techniques that might be helpful if you are considering getting certified. The way I'm structuring my talk is as follows. I'd like to share with you a bit about my background, talk about the benefits of getting certified, and then I'll dive straight to my 7 tips for preparing for your AWS certification. So a little bit about me. A Cloud Guru is an online skills development platform for cloud computing, Linux, DevOps, security, and more. My current role is overseeing a team that creates free short-form technical educational content for the community. But I have only been in the tech industry for just under 3 years. Prior to coming to A Cloud Guru, I had no technical background or skill set whatsoever. As someone who's fairly new to tech and straddling the technical-non-technical divide, I'm really passionate about making technical education as accessible and inclusive as possible. Previously, I worked at Oxford University Press as a senior publisher, working on producing children's literacy text. It was there that I became really fascinated with the process of knowledge acquisition and metacognition. Having to view learning through a child's eyes really helped me think about the process of building up knowledge and experience in a brand new field. And what strategies can come in handy when you're almost having to learn everything from scratch, just like I did. In terms of my certification journey, I obtained my first cert, the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner, within 2 months of joining A Cloud Guru, and then subsequently went on to achieve all 3 AWS Associate certs in the next 18 months. The reason why I wanted to get certified was to get to understand the field I was in, cloud computing in general and the AWS ecosystem in particular. I also wanted to do this as a personal challenge. It has made a huge difference in the way that I do my work, and I feel that I can speak a common language with my colleagues. So, why get certified? Here are some reasons why. It could be an employment requirement. You could be aspiring to a promotion or a salary raise. According to the 2019 Global IT Knowledge Report, the 3 AWS Associate certifications, as well as the Solutions Architect Professional, rank among the top 10 highest paying certifications worldwide. You could be trying to improve your job marketability and professional credibility. You may be trying to establish yourself in the industry. Or like me, you could be in a tech-adjacent role and trying to establish a common language and culture of understanding within your teams. Or you might just be up for a personal challenge. Your reasons, no matter what, are valid. And the more personally meaningful you can make those goals, the more likely you will be to be successful. I did have a handful of people saying that the fact that someone like me could get certified was devaluing the whole idea of certifications in the first place. It did at times lead me to feel a lot of self-doubt, and at times also led me to feel shame, like I was an imposter or a fraud. Thankfully, this kind of gatekeeping is rare. People are overwhelmingly very positive and supportive. If you do get this kind of commentary, I urge you to disregard it and not let others tell you what you are allowed to or not allowed to achieve. Look, at the end of the day, experience is critical to landing a job. There is no doubt about that. A cert is not a magic bullet, but doing certs is one way to immerse yourself in the field, really get a solid understanding of the AWS ecosystem, and build up the foundations for your aspirational career. I have heard so many stories of people from within my network who went from entry-level call center positions or hospitality or service roles to becoming established industry professionals. And the first step that they often took was to get certified. So with that, I'd like to share you my top 7 tips for getting certified and building a knowledge base, particularly if, like me, you haven't got a traditional tech background. But even if you're a veteran, I hope you find some of these tips and techniques useful. I'm going to be using lots of really simple, concrete examples to try to make this as interesting and illustrative as possible. My first tip is to find your framework. Find a core training program to structure your learning. Full disclosure, I used A Cloud Guru's training courses as my core study materials to obtain all of my certs, and I found it very accessible as someone with zero IT background. But regardless, there are many training options available to suit your budget and preferred style, whether it's online or in-person training from AWS or third-party providers, or even books and documentation. Look up reviews, sample some material, and find something that works for you. From my experience and from observing the experience of others, there are generally 2 approaches you can use for study. The first, which is the approach that I use, is if you have little experience or knowledge base for that particular cert. Use the core training program as your main anchor, and as you go through the sequence of material, you may need to dip out and learn foundational tech concepts along the way. Use continual assessment to check your knowledge and identify areas to revise, and keep looping through this process of learning, assessing, and revising until you are ready to take a practice test and then the actual exam. For those with more experience, the process is still very much the same, but you could start with a diagnostic test first as a time-efficient way to target the areas you need to revise or learn without wasting a lot of time rehashing things that you might already know very well. My second point is about time management. My biggest tip is to book the exam date well in advance, even before you've started the training program. By doing this, you keep yourself accountable with a very clear target in front of you. The exam date can be changed as long as it's more than 24 hours out. You won't incur a penalty or forfeit any exam fees. I suggest creating a simple schedule, and I literally use Excel for this, to create a calendar view. The slide shows an excerpt from my study schedule for the Solutions Architect Associate. Chunk the course syllabus from whatever training provider you select into a schedule. If there are 10 sections, chunk it out into roughly time equivalent blocks, and add a buffer of about 2 to 3 weeks for doing practice exams, time to read AWS documentation, and general revision. Having everything planned ahead of time helps you to do a few things. It keeps you on track, it instills some consistency, keeps you accountable, and gives you flexibility to vary your coverage, especially if you have unforeseen events pop up during the week. My third tip is about building your conceptual foundations, and I'm going to go through 4 techniques that can help with this. One of the most useful techniques that I have come across, and one that many of us might already be doing without even realizing, is the Feynman technique. It's named after the American theoretical physicist Richard Feynman, who was really gifted at breaking down extremely complex topics into simple and accessible language. If you've ever heard of people saying, "explain it like I'm 5, that's the Feynman technique essentially in a nutshell. His whole premise is that if you cannot explain something in simple terms, you don't understand it enough. So let's explore the Feynman technique broken down into 4 steps. First, you select a topic and study it. Step 2, explain the topic as simply as you can to yourself. Imagine you're explaining this to a child or someone without any background knowledge whatsoever. Then identify gaps in knowledge and then relearn the material. And then repeat steps 2 to 3 as needed. Finally, when you've got the gist of it, simplify the language, apply an analogy or visualization techniques to really embed that knowledge. So now let's look at an example of this applied. Let's talk about load balancing. So step 1, I first watched some video lectures on what load balancing is. Step 2, then I got out a blank document to write down a simple explanation of what load balancing means. So what I ended up coming up with was, load balancing is a process of distributing network traffic to multiple servers to prevent overloading a single server. Then I started to identify things I didn't understand, like what is network traffic? What is a server? Why does not having a load balancer sometimes cause servers to be overloaded? Then I repeated that step as needed. Step 4, I started to look at other techniques like analogies and visualizations to really internalize this information. And I'll talk about an analogy that we can use for load balancing shortly. Now let's move on to analogies. I am a big fan of using analogies to help with concept building. Here's an example of an analogy that I use to help me remember the different EC2 pricing models, with cost optimization being a significant part of the Solutions Architect Associate cert. I found myself having difficulty remembering the different models, so I thought about relating these to gym membership models. So let's have a look at this in closer detail. So your on-demand EC2 instances are like having a casual gym membership if you're not going to be a frequent gym goer. Pop in for a class and pay for it on demand. Your spot EC2 instances are like quick sale classes where they might text you a promo if they're running low on class numbers and selling the classes at a lower price. Reserved instances are like a fixed membership for a period of 1 or 3 years. Dedicated hosts are like a personal trainer. Just like you don't want to share tenancy on your virtual machines, you may not want to be sharing a class with strangers. And the savings plan model is like having a franchise discount, where you can switch it up and go to different partner gyms and different class types, as long as you commit to a certain usage. So why are analogies so powerful? They provide a scaffold to link new knowledge to existing concepts. They help you to organize new information. They let you focus on the most salient aspects and patterns, and they lend themselves easily to diagramming and visualization, which I'm going to talk about next. So, speaking of the load balancing example, here's an analogy that we can use. Imagine your system is a kitchen, and you have restaurant patrons who are like your web clients. You have your chefs at the cook stations in the kitchen, which are analogous to EC2 instances. You may have multiple chefs, but they may not know what each other is doing. Some chefs might be overloaded, while some might not have enough dishes to prepare compared to other chefs. So you need a head chef to act as a load balancer who can direct the orders to the chefs, depending on their load and even their specializations. Your load balancer or head chef could direct the orders evenly in a round-robin style and keep fanning the orders out. Or they may find the chef with the fewest dishes to prepare and send orders that way. So that's analogous to the least connections model of load balancing. And the head chef does a health check too. If they spot a chef getting tired or feeling unwell or not responding to the orders in a timely way, the head chef's going to tell that chef to take a break and stop sending orders their way. I mentioned that analogies are so powerful because they lend themselves so easily to visualization. This is the load balancer analogy visualized, with the head chef sending the orders in a particular logic towards the chefs at their cook station. And from here, we are just a hop and a skip away from these really informal visualizations to architectural diagrams that are so heavily used in tech. So visualizations are a really effective way to incorporate new knowledge into your mental model. The last technique I found so useful for building my conceptual model is mnemonics. It's a shortcut method for remembering low-level information to free up cognitive load. And here I have an example of a mnemonic to remember the OSI 7-layer model. Please do not touch Steve's pet alligator, which then stands for physical, data link, network, transport, sessions, presentation, and applications layer. And a big shout out to my colleague Nick for introducing me to this one. This is a great technique for information that you just need to know and can't really be logically deducted quickly. And just a word of caution, mnemonics are not a substitute for deep understanding, but they do have their place and they are a very helpful part of the toolkit. My fourth tip is to get hands-on. This is the really fun part. Whatever training program you use, getting hands-on will undoubtedly be part of it. This is how the concepts and knowledge you've spent time building will now start to feel a lot more tangible and real. The AWS free tier is so useful here to let you experiment and have a go with actually using AWS services to build cool things with little to no cost. Generally, any training program will have the instructor at the minimum demonstrate the service, and at best, actually challenge you to build the tech. You won't properly understand or be successful in tech if you don't actually apply practical skills. My suggestion is that to get the best results, follow this exercise with intentionality rather than just parroting or blindly following along. What I would do is to take screenshots as you go, write down notes along the way, reflect on what each step does. If something doesn't go to plan, write it down and troubleshoot. Using the AWS free tier is fantastic. Convenient, easy, usually free or pretty cheap. But always use AWS budgets to set billing alert thresholds. And AWS have now made it possible to set your AWS budgets to a daily granularity. I'm sure many of us have been caught out before, so do be very careful and use this monitoring tool to keep you safe and alert. Some commercial providers provide sandbox environments with their training platform, which means that you can get hands-on without taking the risk. And here I'd just like to mention that in 2020, A Cloud Guru introduced cloud playgrounds and hands-on labs where you are provided with a real open AWS environment that you can start playing around with no risk of personally incurring unexpected costs to your credit card. Alright, moving on. My fifth tip is to create your own scenarios, one of my favorite techniques. This is where you fuse both practical and theoretical knowledge by creating a scenario. Even better if it's something you actually also create as a project in real life. This approach is known as problem-centered learning. When you create scenarios that reflect real-world situations, it creates sticky learning experiences. And AWS certification exam questions from associate level and up are heavily scenario-based anyway. So when I was learning about DynamoDB for the first time, I found it so hard to remember things like primary keys, or passing on IAM conditions, global and local secondary indexes, and what scan and query operations were. So I challenged myself to create a scenario that would tie all of these things together and have me actually build something out on DynamoDB. I wrote myself a scenario imagining that I was an owner of a pet clinic, needing to set up a database to store the information of my clients and patients. I thought through what I would need my database to do, and then actually created my own table and played around with it to see if I could meet all my business requirements. For example, I thought about what primary key I would use to set up my pet clinic database. If I use pet first name as my partition, that might be fine if I only had 14 patients. But as my business grows and the pet names may not be as highly cardinal, it might not scale going forward. A composite key consisting of the pet name as the partition key and the registration date as the sort key would be a more unique combination. I also tried playing around with local and global secondary indexes and ran scan and query operations on my table to see how I could return different sets of results. And I learned so much about DynamoDB and how I could use it in a hypothetical business situation, which is so valuable when I may not, in my day-to-day, have access to this type of technology or use case. If you create a scenario, choose something fun and personal that you can relate to. I find that all my scenarios that I create pretty much relate to food and animals. So tip number 6 is about using assessments effectively. As you go through practice exams, you get so much bang for your buck with really studying the questions you flagged or got wrong. So this is my process to use as a revision tool. For each question, ask yourself why an option is the right answer. Explain to yourself why the other options are not correct, and then try to work at the root of the misconception. Why did I pick this particular incorrect option? What are my underlying assumptions for me to make that choice? Then after that, re-watch and revise the relevant material accordingly. My final tip is to use your network and community effectively. Harness the power of collective knowledge. At A Cloud Guru, each course we have has an attached forum. You can also go to other places like Quora, Reddit, the comments section of websites and blogs, any place that has a gathering of like-minded individuals with similar goals that you can learn from. Use these forums as a learning exercise. Ask questions for things that you just cannot figure out on your own. See if you can help answer or contribute to a question that someone else has asked. And even if you're too shy to publicly respond, try to explain the answer to yourself. View other people's experiences about the exam, read their exam reports, and what areas they recommend focusing on. After you take the exam and hopefully pass it, take the opportunity to give back to the community and share your insights and experience to help other fellow students. So with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. To recap, here are my 7 tips to getting certified. First of all, find your framework. Select a core training program or course to structure the entire study process. Tip 2, book your exam in advance. Use a timetable or scheduler to keep yourself accountable and on track. Tip number 3, build your conceptual foundations, using techniques such as the Feynman technique, analogies, visualizations and diagrams, and mnemonics. Tip number 4, get hands-on. Get into the AWS environment and start building. Tip number 5, make your case. Create a scenario that will link your theoretical knowledge with the hands-on learning. Tip number 6, use assessments effectively to identify gaps in knowledge and as a basis for revision. And tip number 7 is to harness the power of peer learning. Learn from others' experiences and give back to the community. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you all the best in your journey to upskilling. If you're interested in learning more about A Cloud Guru, please do check out the QR code on screen. A Cloud Guru offers free plan memberships where you can get access to a limited selection of courses and a permanent library of short-form, engaging, free video content from instructors including Faye Ellis and AWS machine learning hero Keisha Williams. Please don't forget to rate this session and don't hesitate to reach out to me via LinkedIn or Twitter if you'd like to connect. Thank you. Finally, I just wanted to say that A Cloud Guru is proud to support AWS She Builds Online 2020 and proud to support a program that is making the IT community more inviting and inclusive for women by amplifying women's voices and supporting women's career and skills building in tech. We are giving away 20 free one-year memberships to our personal basic subscription. With this membership, you will get full access to A Cloud Guru's entire training library, including courses, quizzes, and hands-on labs. This is on a first-come, first-served basis, so simply scan the QR code on screen now and fill in your details to go into the running. Thank you, and on to the live Q&A.